Today, I'm going to share with you the 4 components of a weekly seller report that naturally leads to price reductions. So we've got a lot of work to do. As you all know, right now the market has shifted, so we're seeing a slowdown in buyer demand. So some listings are sitting a little bit longer. Some listings, the pricing's a little off, and we're going to need to get price reductions. What I want to deliver to you guys today is I want to deliver you the weekly seller report that you guys can confidently take more listings even if they're a little overpriced. And the seller report will naturally help your seller come to the right conclusion, and so that you guys can get that property sold and still maintain a 5-star customer review and a great past client. So a bold promise. We've got lots of work to do. Let's dive in. So in this video, I'm going to cover 2 things. The 4 components that make up the seller report. I'm going to give you guys some language and some best practices of that. And then the second thing at the end, I'm going to give you a little bonus. There's 2 things I want to discuss, which is on negotiation and also the reverse offer, which I think is a rad tool for us to use in this new market cycle. So let's dive in. The 4 components of the weekly seller report, let's do a quick overview and dive deep. Number 1, share the stats of your marketing efforts and the buyer and agent feedback. Number 2, review any new comps on the marketplace. Number 3, cover any new news about the housing market and what's going on with the local stats. And then number 4 of the weekly seller report, you're going to review their options. So let's dive in. So in component number 1, share the stats from your marketing efforts and the feedback and your notes. So as we all know, we've got things like list reports where we can get a window into how many views did this property get on Zillow and Redfin and all the different portals, how many buyers in your MLSs have this property in their saved search, how many of emails and alerts were sent out on behalf of the MLS and how many people open those. So there are a lot of reports that we can share with the seller that literally demonstrate how many people have viewed their property. Those stat reports are very important. Okay. Number 2 component of that is how many agent showings did you guys have? We want to keep a running total of this. Some of you guys have services like Showing Suite or Showing Time where we can keep track of those things. A lot of agents don't have that or don't use it. We do need to start keeping track of this. Most of you did not need to do this in the last couple of years, so we might be out of practice and we don't have a system. So keep track of the total number of showings. And of course, I wrote down the buyer and the agent feedback. And we need to all get better at delivering the feedback. No opinions, say the feedback exactly as you get it and get good at that practice. Okay, the last thing I said is on this topic of showings and buyer agent feedback is look for trends, especially if you mentioned concerns at the beginning at your listing appointment. I noticed this with myself. At the listing appointment, I saw a feature of the house and I knew that feature was going to be a negative in the eyes of the buyer. I may or may not have brought that up to the seller. If I did bring that up to the seller and I mentioned it, and then now in the agents and the buyer feedback, we're getting reports back that is an important feature, please have confidence to share that back with them so that it's validated that this was a concern and it is having an influence on the perceived value of their property. Okay, so please be aware that you guys need to up your game there. The third step in the marketing stats and feedback is how many open houses have you done and how many people showed up and what was the feedback and the notes from the buyers and the agents. So those are the 3 components of our stats from our marketing efforts. We need to figure out how to present that in a structured manner and do that consistently week after week. All right, let's go to component number 2 of the weekly seller report that naturally leads to price reductions. And that is covering any new comps that are available on the market. I've got some language here that's really helpful to use that I think is important. One of the things I'm constantly having to remind myself and all my coaching clients is we cannot use industry language with our customers. Role play. Let's take a look at any new competition and options your buyers have today. Then what buyers did decide to buy and why they chose those other properties instead of yours. And finally, what new homes sold And these are the new comparables that an appraiser would potentially use when evaluating your home for your buyer's loan. Now, I know that was a mouthful, but you can hear what I was constructing is natural language that helps educate the customer, the seller, on how we view new listings, new under contract, and new sold. Bring this down to natural language. So, of course, in component number 2 of the weekly seller report, you need to be saying, here's the new listings that we're now competing with. Here's what buyers did buy to let them know that buyers are in the game, making decisions right now, and then that you can use that as leverage in this educational process and the new comps. Hey, Mr. Seller, look at this property. They just closed at a lower number, and look at the features and the benefits of that property, the location of that property. Look at where they listed, and then look where they ended up. Good education for them, right? Let's go. Component number 3 of the weekly seller report that naturally leads to price reductions. Give them an update on any housing market news or local stats. Now, some of you may not be proficient with reporting on the housing market yet. I've been covering this a lot on my YouTube channel as a coach. It's kind of where I do my vlogging for my clients and all my friends out there in the real estate industry. So, Tom has been doing an exceptional job with KCM on the Facebook weekly program. I've been on there with him, and they're doing amazing stuff. But if you guys are not having a lot of confidence yet in this, I'm going to give you 2 things to help you out. Number 1 is a simple script. And the script is this. Hey, Mr. Seller, this week I was in a meeting with my broker and 10 of some of the best agents in town that I work with. We were all talking about what we're seeing in terms of trends in the marketplaces, and here's a few things that we all are seeing at the same time. We're all seeing blah, 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 blah. So the framing of this is really powerful, okay? I was in a meeting with my broker, an authority, someone who's been in the business for 40 years, the high-level authority with some of the best agents, and we're all saying the same thing, okay? Again, what I want to avoid in talking about the housing market and the stats is opinions, your opinion, and feelings, right? And generalizations. Be careful with that. I wrote down in my notes, the second thing is that you may need to share articles, you may need to share maybe a YouTube video on an expert saying some interesting things. So share stuff. This is best practice. Way back in 2008, 9, 10, what we would do is we'd cut out articles in the newspaper from Wall Street Journal, from Bloomberg News, or from the local newspaper. We'd cut out articles and we would make copies, and we'd have to share it and explain it to the seller to let them know that we are not here full of excuses. This is really what's happening in the economy and the influence that we are having to deal with as professionals. Very important strategy. The third thing in explaining the housing market, just a tip for all of you guys. We all have to get better in 2023 in explaining the buyer demand decrease. Not from a place of opinion, feeling, theory, but we really need to use stats and math. So an example of that is I read something the other day, and it talked about the total percentage of institutional buyers who bought homes in 2021. Well, it was a certain percentage. And so the explanation to a seller that says this percentage of the buyer pool is gone, that is a fact, that is math, right? Another example of that is I've seen a chart that showed that, the first-time home buyers participation has gone down. That's another example of math, not just a feeling or theory, right? We all know in a rising interest rate environment, we're not seeing the trade uppers, so the sell buy, right? So another percentage of the buyer pool is out. And then, of course, the most important kind of stat and metric we all need to get more comfortable with in explaining and sharing and talking about is the affordability percentage. And we all know what that is. That's very simple. It is at the median income in your marketplace, at the median sales price, at today's interest rate, the monthly payment is, and then the percentage of the population based upon that median income that can afford that monthly payment. the percentage of the people that can afford that has gone down. So it's a decrease in the total number of buyers that can afford to buy the home at this price. And for a lot of you right now, you're having to show the seller that at the average loan amount today for their property, right, a 3% interest rate, the monthly payment is, and at a 6% interest rate, the monthly payment is. And so that's a way for the seller to understand, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? There are less people that can afford to buy a home at this price with this rate today. And that is a clear, it's not a feeling, a theory, it's not an excuse on our part that we don't have 4 or 5 offers yet and we're not seeing 10 showings every single weekend. We're seeing significantly less showings, and that puts the seller in a better educational place to make a good decision with you. All right, my friends, so component number 4, review their options. And this is where all of you guys have been waiting for. But without step 1, 2, and 3, reviewing your options is not as strong. Okay, so we got to create a presentation, a weekly seller report with 1, 2, and 3, and then we come over and talk about the 6 options. So let's dig in. I'm just going to review the options and we'll dig into some details on that. Option number 1 is we change something with the marketing. Okay. Option number 2, we change something with the house to increase the perceived value of the home. Option number 3, we stay the course and do nothing. Option number 4 is a small price reduction. I refer to them as micro price reductions. We'll talk about that in a minute. Option number 5 is a 5% price reduction. Option number 6 is a 10% price reduction. Now, there's a lot of talk in the industry about the term price reduction. And so, yes, we can change up the term a little bit if you want. You want to say price correction. You want to say price adjustment. Use the term that you feel comfortable with. What I've learned is the more I do the thorough seller report, the less the term that I use matters. The stronger my presentation, the less it matters what term I use. Okay, so let's dive in and let's take a look at the 6 things. Number 1 is change something with the marketing. Now, for some of my newer agents, you may not be aware of what to do with this. And for my veteran agents, you know what to do, but you now need to actually start practicing some of these old skills that you used to use, because in the last 2 years, you could have had the worst photos, the said nothing in the description, and it still would have sold, and it would have sold in 30 seconds or less. Today, we actually have to be a little bit more mindful. So I remember I was talking to a phenomenal broker, and we had a property that was a little stagnant. This was back in like 2015 or 16. And we were asking some advice on what we can do to increase the showings and to try and get more traffic, right? And the broker said, well, change up some of the photos, change up the order, change up some of the description. Do the simple thing first, kids. And he said, get out of here. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of stupid. And then I went, oh no, let's give it a shot. And so I was so grateful for that advice, because I was like, okay, well, what would be a better first photo? And maybe I should change that up. Could that increase the view to showing ratio? Then I was like, let's take a look at the description. Is the description really compelling? Did I just write a bunch of fluff? Like, what's going on there? Is there anything I could do to improve the description? Now, I did have a scenario where this became actually really important. I was selling an Adobe estate that was a winery, a tasting room, and had a horse stable and a horse ring. 7 acres with an Adobe house at the top of the hill in Ramona, San Diego, California. And that was a very tough sale. And what I learned in that process, I changed up the description, I changed up the photos, and did this. This is actually where I first wrote out the most thorough weekly seller report I've ever had to do, and it worked like a charm. This kind of was that scenario where the epiphany happened. And what I learned, 2 things. Number 1 was the feedback and the questions I was getting from the very few buyers that showed up. There was a common thread in there, and they kept asking me about the water rights in the well. And it finally dawned on me, wait a minute, this is the most important question. It also is a really high quality feature that I was not necessarily aware of. And I went back and looked at my MLS property description and it wasn't there. So I changed it up to add that really valuable feature from the feedback from the buyer. Number 2 was the perspective of this property. It was 7 acres, it was gorgeous, it was on a hill, it had this beautiful view, and I kept realizing that people are not getting a sense of the orientation of the property. So found some kids, got these kids who were drone photographers. I drove them out there, paid them $120, and I got some really beautiful drone overview photos. And then I changed up my MLS photos to add that in. And in that process, it really did make a difference. In the next open house that I had more people who showed up, and I wasn't receiving those questions about the well. So I knew that that was a good move. Now, bottom line, guys, at the end of the day, let's take responsibility. Can we do anything to improve the marketing, to increase the number of people that would show up to the property based upon the view count? Let's take full responsibility. Once we have completed every bit of effort to be able to do that, then we can confidently say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we've done everything. Of the 3,000 people that have now looked at your property, we have put your property's every feature of the best foot forward. It's now time for us to take a look at step number 2. Right? We want to feel good about that. Step number 2 is make improvements to the property to increase the perceived value of the property is really our second option. Now, a lot of great agents, this is where you specialize in, hey, depersonalizing, decluttering, staging, painting, mulch, all these little tricks and hacks that we all have to make the property look a lot better, to show better, and or to kind of distract some of the buyers from some of the negative features and to have them focus more on the great features so they feel more inspired to make the offer, right? These are some of the great things that we do. Now, at this point in the weekly seller report, you may have at the listing presentation made some suggestions to the seller, and they may have denied some of those requests that you said, hey, this would make your property show better, look better, and be better to be marketed. This is now the time to bring that back to the table. Hey, Mr. Seller, do you remember when I said that we should probably consider doing this, this, and this to your property because this would increase the perceived value and it would show better, could motivate a buyer's offer. Would you like to explore doing any one of those things at this time, right? Give them the option to fix and improve the property. Number 3, stay the course. Let's talk about this. This is an influence and persuasion tactic to maintain good respect and trust for ourselves as salespeople, okay? What I mean by that is if we tell the seller, hey, we can do nothing and stay the course, what you're signaling is I'm not asking you or pressuring you to do anything today, right? I am committed to helping you achieve the goal. I am committed to the plan. If you feel comfortable with where we're at and where we're headed, then I am committed to doing this. This is your property and you are ultimately in control. Okay? That is a powerful psychology and influence communication strategy before we move to number 4, which is the price reduction first step. So, my friends, I learned from an amazing agent in Orange County. He shared with me the strategy of the micro price reduction. And as soon as I really started doing some price reductions back in 15, 16, 17, 18, when I was way more active as a listing agent, what I learned was that a price reduction, we have to explain one important factor with our sellers, and we need to let them know the moment we adjust the price in the MLS, what happens after that is an alert notification, emails go out to all of the buyers who have their property criteria in their search. And so in essence, any change to a price sends the signal back out into the buyer market to relook at your property. So when I explain that that's what happens, then they go, oh, I get it. So I have used the micro price reduction in conjunction with changes to my marketing and or changes to the property. So if you're pretty confident about your pricing and you just feel like you need to make a few more adjustments, make the adjustments, then use the micro price reduction to bring forth the property back in front of everybody's eyes, and then do your open house that weekend and let's test the activity and the traffic. So it's a very powerful strategy, my friends, that I highly recommend that you explore how to use that in the right circumstances. Now, classically, we want to get to, number 5, which is a 5% price reduction, and or number 6, a 10% price reduction. So these are the 3 options that the seller has in terms of price reductions: micro, 5%, 10%. A lot of you guys have in your listing presentations the NAR stat presentation. I don't have it right here. Tom's talked about it a million times. Your brokers probably all have it, but it basically shows the pyramid and the percentage of the buyers at this pricing, and then the percentage of the buyers at that pricing, and the bigger percentage. I think most of you guys know what we're talking about. So you can see at a 5%, at 10%, we're opening up the buyer pool, and then Mr. Seller, you can see why that would be valuable to us. Okay, so just to wrap that up, you can see that when you review the 6 options after going through initially the stats, right, the new comps, the housing market, then their options, that is a great flow that would allow the sellers to come to the right conclusion next. Should we do this on a weekly basis? The answer is absolutely yes. It should be a part of our customer service and experience for homeowners who list their property with us. Do we need to all get to work on the system? Yes. All right, so I promised you guys 2 additional points and hacks. All right, so point number 1, when I've gotten price reductions, I noticed something with the seller. They said to me, hey, if I do this price reduction, does that put us in a vulnerable position for buyers to do lowball offers? Now, that is a natural instinct for a smart seller, and it's going to show up for some of you. So you're going to need to confidently say, no, that is perfectly okay. My negotiation strength and skills will be able to handle that. And number 2, my friends, what I started future pacing my sellers at the listing appointment was that I wanted the low ball offer, and that I celebrated the lowball offer, and that we together would take the lowball offer and we would play games with the lowball offer, because I, as a seasoned listing agent, had strategy on how to manipulate them to then also use them to create urgency for all the other buyers and agents, and to try and field the multiple offer situation and to get the game ramped up into our favor. So my friends, if you haven't explained that yet to a seller, you may need to now remind them that, hey, no, the goal of the price reduction is to increase the views and the showings and to bring as many buyers back into the house. I want to get that so that I could start negotiating and getting you an offer, and then start negotiating, getting you the highest possible price and the best terms that I can. Just show some strength. Number 2, little bonus point here, is the reverse offer, my friends. There was a really interesting strategy back in the day where we, as the listing agent, when a buyer wrote an offer and we rejected it, and then we came back on the market, it was like, well, why don't we go back to that buyer before we take this price reduction? And if the price reduction is close to the value in which the previous offer came in, how about you just say, hey, Mr. Seller, can I go back to the buyer's agent and the buyer and let them know that we would be willing to accept an offer at blank terms, right? This is the reverse offer. So listing agents, this is a great opportunity. So before we do a big price reduction, you may just want to go back to 3 or 4 of some of the most committed buyers, agents, and buyers, and just say, here's what the seller would be willing to take. Would you like to engage in this conversation before I do the price reduction in the next couple of days? And that should field some phenomenal conversations. So my friends, I hope you enjoyed the weekly seller report that naturally leads to price reductions. You are subscribed to the channel. I'm just doing coaching vlog, just sharing the best ideas that I have with my Tom Ferry coaching clients out there into the general public so that you guys can enjoy that. I'm at about 2,500 subscribers, so I'd love it if you guys subscribed and started following me along there. Have a wonderful day, guys. Let's go and get more listings and help these sellers get their home sold.